Lemon Amiga presents.
Hi there, welcome to another very special episode of the Lemon Amiga Game Guides and Reviews. In this show, we'll be checking out the top 20 vertical shoot-em-ups on the Amiga as voted for by you in the Lemon Amiga Database. And this countdown is based on your score on the Lemon Amiga Database. And hopefully all of the top 20 scorers in this video will have scored above 5 out of 10, which is pretty mediocre, it has to be said. During this countdown, I was forced to play loads of games that I'd never even heard about before, and some of these you can see on the screen at the moment. Some of those turned out to be amazing, and some of those turned out to be diabolical, and in this case the graphics are okay and the music is okay, but apparently the gameplay actually is on the below standard side. In this top 20 countdown, we won't be including any demo games, and so we will be featuring this Raiden demo, which appeared on AGA machines, and you can see that a pretty good job has been done carving this out. I think only the first level was represented in this demo, but this does not appear in the Lemon Amiga database, so it will not appear in this list. Some games like Phantom Fighter are actually multi-level games, and some of those are horizontal and some of them are vertical, and it's the vertical ones that we're really bothered about with this playthrough. And yes, I'd never even heard about this game before, and this is level 2 where we get to scroll along the landscape, and unfortunately I died pretty regularly. So these are the games which did not make it into the list, and this is Sonic Boom, and Sonic Boom is quite a good game in the arcade, but sadly not on the Amiga, and I don't know how they managed to turn a really good blaster into an average shooter, but they seem to have accomplished that, and that's why this game does not appear, unfortunately, in the top 20 countdown. Number 20, we find Frenetic, developed by Core Design and released in 1991. We start off our vertical shooters list with quite a colourful one. This is Frenetic. Again, a game I'd never even played before, but I had to play this earlier this year when I was discovering games for the shoot-em-ups, which I would play in the Lemon Play Guides, and I played this a little bit and I got on to the third section, and it's not bad. You can see the power-ups on offer aren't bad. I've managed to pick up a side shot, and you can pick up a nice range of weapons in this game, and you go through some different scenery changes as well. end of each level, you'll find a boss, and if you have upgraded and acquired that firepower, of course you can take that on. And with these side shots, it's not so bad because you can simply move to one side and avoid most of its firepower. How the bosses in this game don't take forever to knock out, and they're not impossible to work out how to destroy either, but unfortunately the level design as we move on is a little bit on the hard side, and if you don't have those power-ups, you can see with this forward firepower it is pretty useless, and I'm going to have to avoid my share of bullets to continue. Music on offer is good, and the graphics are very good, and the playability is very accurate, and if the player makes a mistake, well, that's their fault. You can weave in between these number of pixel wide blocks which appear, which represent items which we must avoid, and the bullets in this case being minute means we can pack lots of those on the screen. All great shooters, we have to blast our way through the scenery, and the obstacles and the creatures on offer are different. In this case I'm choosing the left way because it looks easier, and you can see that this game has style and it has content. It's by core design, but unfortunately one shot will kill us, and that is a weakness of the game, but it's the only thing I can find that is a major weakness and saves this from being a high scorer. Despite the great graphics, the great music and the playability, Frenetic only got 53% as user rating on the Lemon Amiga Database. At number 19 we find Bomber Bob, published by Idea Software in 1990. Bomber Bob takes a more light-hearted approach to the shoot-'em-up genre, and it's probably the most cartoony game that we'll be reviewing, or at least covering, in this video. You can see that we are a fighter pilot, but in this case we have to shoot down some angry animals, and some of those are cats and some of those are bears, and now we even find an airship. We find all kinds of critters, and can also launch bombs down and destroy barrels and boats, and so there is a lot to do in this little game. During this countdown, apart from one game, we won't be using automatic fire that I have on the zip stick. Yes, I will be rapidly pressing my fire button very quickly, because in some games that is actually quicker than the auto fire, and in some games that actually makes a huge difference. And so apart from one game, which I will be pointing out, this is with the normal fire, and so it's extra difficult sometimes to progress. The crazy thing about Bomber Bob is that after every single level we will disappear into a hole, and in that hole we get to fly down a 3D tunnel. And yes, that's right, this vertical shooter turns into a 3D game, and this was one of the reasons why I almost ended up in the 3D games and shooters which we covered this year. But in the meantime, it got 56% on the Lemon Amiga Database. Number 18 is Air Supply, published by Magic Bytes in 1990. And yes, again, Air Supply is a game I'd never even heard of before I clapped eyes on the figures on the Lemon Amiga Database and realised I was going to have to play it. And so you can see me airdropping a few parcels where it says help, and this is why this game is called Air Supply, because you must dive bomb things and dive down and drop things onto where it says help. And in the meantime, you have to avoid getting destroyed, and of course if you run out of those airdrop units, of which we only have 4, we'll have to return back to that runway and pick up some more. Unfortunately, I don't know how to do that in this game. Just like Iridium, we can turn around and we can fire backwards and we can drop things and we can alter the speed at which this thing scrolls, either manually or automatically with a joystick. And well, this game has something going on for it, and this thing has got firepower. It has a quirky sense of gameplay, and it will take you some time to get through it, and this is deserved of 58% on the Lemon database. At number 17, it's Plutos, published by MicroValue in 1987. Again, a game I'd never clapped eyes on before setting out to cover it. And in this video, and as you can see, with hammering that fire button, it is possible to get through lots of nasties and make our way through space along, well, maybe a planet of Pluto, no idea. But you can see it has the original 8-bit blaster feel on the Amiga. Not sure how to use the weapons, but with this standard blaster it's possible to knock out the end of level boss, and you have to poke that thing's eyes out before the screen scrolls, and sometimes that's only just possible when that boss is quite large. But here we go, this is now stage 4, and it means that it's the familiar territory, and again I'm not quite sure how to power up, but apart from that, this is a very solid blaster. This game came out in 1987, and it's easy to see that heritage in the graphics and the lack of music and the very basic sound effects. But what sound effects we do have are good, and the clang as we hit those bonuses is well done, and so this game could have been worse, and it's one of those early gems released on the Amiga. Blutos has an average score of 60% on the Lemon database. At number 16 is Anatomic Man, developed and published by Accolade and released in 1988. In Anatomic Man, we must fly our ship around the anatomy of a human being, entering through the mouth and going down through the throat into the stomach, and then through the bowels into the rest of the human being. You can see an Amiga pointer is actually pointing to where we are at the moment. That's through the breathing pipe, and we'll have to enter our way down to the stomach. I could only find the French version of this game, and I think that this was only released in France. And yes, we can bounce off the sides, just like Sidewinder, which is a nice touch, and we make our way through a human being, much like the later games that we saw, like Macrocosm, which tried to do the same thing. Despite its cute graphics, I feel the handling is a little on the laggy side, and I think the power-ups could have been more evident in the game, but you can see that this got an average of 60% rating on the Lemon Amiga Database.
That's the name of the game. It will get you intact.
Number 15, we find Intact, developed by CrossTechnics and released in 1989. And yet again, this is a brand new game for me. I have never even clapped eyes anywhere near this. I've never heard of it, I've never seen it, and this is my very first try. And you can see that this is a scrolling vertical shoot 'em up, and just like Delta, it gives us those power-ups in blocks. So if we collect one, that means the later ones will be unavailable, but we get to collect these tokens along the way, and you can see the credits on the right pile up, and if we have certain credits, we can afford the very best firepower. Just like Hybris, you can see those things on the floor, what look like electric fields. Those things cannot be shot through, and so they act like barriers, and you'll have to go around those. Unlike Hybris, we cannot power up, so you'll have to attack things from the side if they are hiding behind barriers. This game is mad and frantic, and you'll have to hammer that fire button until your arm is falling off, and then it will actually give you a break. And it's these rest bites which are an absolute breather and a godsend in this game. And after you've completed the game once, then you can loop the same 3 stages again, just like Hybris, only this time you'll find the game much harder. Shooter is absolutely immense, and I love this to death. I think it's worth an 8, but the Lemon Amiga crew only awarded it 61%. Number 14 is Apano Sin, or Apano Sin, developed by Level 1 Entertainment and released in the year 2000. And the game begins with a nice space intro, and it's a good job because we're actually in space as usual, and you can see that we have some power-ups and we have a nice nimble blaster, so all we have to do is to destroy those enemies. Level will introduce us to some new firepower and some new enemies, and of course some new backgrounds and some new music as well, and some of those can get tremendously hard and tremendously loud as well. This is not an AGA game, this is an all-CS game, and you can see that more than 16 colours have been used for the background, so just like a demo production, all the stops have been pulled out to try and bring us a very fast, very slick and smooth, and very action-packed and sounding great space shooter. Apano is a game that I only discovered last year when I reviewed it, and so that's another reason why it's in this list, but also because this appears in the Lemon Amiga Database as a vertical shooter, and it's not one that many people have played, hence the very low rating score on Lemon Amiga of 63%. At number 13 we have Xenon, developed of course by the Bitmap Brothers and released in 1988. In Xenon, we get to fly down a landscape, but we don't have to fly on rails. We can wiggle that joystick and we can transform into a tank. That will mean that the screen will freeze and we can take on all the land-based enemies, but for starters, most players will just choose the aircraft and blow away these huge domes, which should leave behind a power-up. Fly by a power-up, or if you just want to destroy a few tanks, you can always transform yourself into a tank and you can take those on, and then you can take off again and continue on in the level. And that's how you can get some great score, and that's how you can sometimes make the job a little bit easier. Xenon starts very fun indeed, and you can collect lots of weapons which make the job very fun, but unfortunately once we get to the end of the first level we can't use this amazingly vast firepower. No, we have to transform back into the tank and take on the end of level boss one shot at a time, and that means for my money this destroys the credibility of the game, and I never got anywhere with it as a result of that. And that affected the old-time general rank playing, and that means that this only scored 65% on the Lemon database. Number 12 is XP8, developed by Weathermine Software and released in 1996. And yet again, this is a game that I only discovered this year in 2017, or at least when I recorded this in 2016, ahead of the reviews on Lemon. And just like all the other late developed games on the Amiga, well, it has great graphics and great playability and great sound effects as well. But because most people had departed from the Amiga, most people have never even played it. XP8 can be played in 1 or 2 player simultaneous mode, and we get to travel through lots of different landscapes, firing lots of different weapons, and you can see we can pick those up and toggle those, and it's great to have such a range of enemies and weapons and things to fly over, and occasionally we'll have to stop and destroy a mid-level boss. Each weapon has its own advantages and disadvantages, and of course in 2-player mode you get twice the firepower, and in this case you get to mix it up and attack all the enemies all at once. You can see a massive amount of colours have been used, and yes, this is the ECS/OCS version, and this game was also released as an AGA version with even better graphics. XP8 is rather difficult, but by pressing that spacebar we can gain some options where we can gain some more shields and make it slightly easier, and by this it means that we can get through some of the levels, and we are even given a password at the end of every level so we can go back and practice or play that and continue from where we left off. And that's brilliant. It means that we don't have to play the game all the way from the beginning every single time we want to play it. people who love long levels which continue for maybe 30 minutes at a time, then this game may be for you, because there is a large range of environments to explore and you're only seeing the first few levels actually. In this video, there are maybe 10 levels in the entire game, and one of those is a high speed tunnel run where you have to blast your way through a tunnel, and also there are future worlds and things like that. Though I hadn't played this 12 months ago, I think right now that XP8 does have lots of an offer, and for newbies to the genre or even veterans, you'll get something back from this. It's not an absolute all-time classic, but I think it deserves more than the 65% rating on the Lemon Amiga Database. Number 11 is Sidewinder, created and released by Mastertronic in 1988. As you can see, I am actually using autofire in this game, and yes, I'm well aware that autofire playing these games usually makes them a lot easier, but I don't usually bother with that. It's just that I used it in this case just for this review. You can see it seamlessly moves from one landscape to another, and there are lots of scenery changes throughout the game. Sidewinder contains some very meaty sound effects and explosions, and you can see I'm playing this on a 7 MHz machine, and sometimes it does slow down. I'm not quite sure whether that is because of the autofire, but sometimes that slowness makes sure that we can get through more of the enemies. I really like the atmosphere in this game as we move through onto what looks like an Egyptian level, and you can see that the difficulty is very difficult and novices will be punished because you don't really get that many firepower upgrades, or at least not that I've found. If the final score was based on gameplay and the sound effects and the atmosphere, then this would be slightly more than 68%. Number 10, we have Overdrive, developed by Infacto and published in 1993. Overdrive is slightly different from all the other shooters in this review, from the fact that this doesn't always scroll forwards. In fact, on the first level, you could be scrolling in any direction. In fact, the user can actually change direction at some points, and it always isn't on rails. And you are given some firepower, and it is possible to run out of firepower. And when that happens, all you can do is to wait around and be given some more. You can see that this on the first level is scrolling us to the side, but we have lots of levels, and we also have lots of power adjustments, as you can see in the bottom corner. And yes, we've now picked up a better weapon. Those graphics in this game are top notch. I feel like the music and sound effects are rather quiet, and they could have done with beefing up rather a lot. And you can see with different power-ups we can mow through those enemies, and on the first level it's a case of taking on whichever one is available, but on later stages you can see that those enemies do pour in waves as we now scroll up the screen. As we destroy waves, we can collect fuel and power, and that will power up our systems. You can see I've managed to find a later level with a dead end, and sometimes it is possible to squeeze through that scenery without taking any damage, but you can see our shield is actually on its way out because it is flashing, and now we have changed onto a different scenario in space. This is the end of level boss, and I've run out of firepower again, as you can see, but we have now been given one, and that's the rebound. You can see that that thing rebounds off the top of that screen and hopefully collides with things underneath, and the action can get pretty hectic, as all the best shooters can. Overdrive has a lot going for it, and it currently holds a 70% rating as voted by you on the Lemon database. At number 9, it's Gumby F99 AGA, developed by APC&TCP and released in 1998. Gumby F99 is a faithful port of the Twinbee in the arcades, and just like that game we can hold down the fire button and release a massive launch of fire towards those enemies, and in the meantime we can fire forwards, and we can also launch a bomb down towards ground-based enemies and gain some kind of a bonus. And you can also see bells, and by destroying those we can gain a power-up, and sometimes a black bell wields absolute death. Some power-ups at our disposal, we can destroy those enemies with double fire, and by pressing the second fire button or the spacebar we can launch a bomb, and some of those enemies actually contain power-ups, and that P there is a power-up, and that means that we have even better firepower, which is desperately needed because the multi-firepower from the arcade version is not in this one, and the best you can hope for is a purple belt to give us a dual firepower attack. End-level bosses are suitably fearsome, and if you have the weapons you can destroy them even with the weediest firepower given enough concentration, and then it's on to the second level, and there are tons of levels to be going through, and at the beginning of every one I think you have to build your firepower up again, but that's not so bad because as you can see these levels are a joy. Gumby F99 is on the medium side of difficult, so it will take some practice, but it is very rewarding, and this game is actually worth a high score on the Lemon Amiga Database of 72%. Number 8 is Lethal XS, developed by Eclipse Software and released on the Amiga in 1991. Lethal XS is the sequel to Wings of Death, and on the first level we can see that we are a spaceship and we have to destroy lots of different alien creatures in order to gain some power-ups. game we really do have a nice range of power-ups on offer, but it starts off very difficult as most of the hardest shoot-em-ups tend to do. A little bit more firepower, this game becomes a joy, but these temporary power-ups are only a temporary help because when they wear off, you will unfortunately have to go down to your existing firepower, the one that you had before, and that is this weird ank-shaped firepower that I have at the moment. You can see those skulls have to be avoided because they will downgrade our firepower and all our power-ups, and that is lethal on a game like this. We even have a strength bar, and when our energy runs out, that's game over, or at least life over, and now I've picked up yet another weapon. This game is quite tough, but it's not the hardest that we will see in this countdown, and you can even press the spacebar to release a blitz attack, and we get to listen to some great music as well. There is nothing wrong with the music or the sound effects, it's just that the sound effects could have been beefed up a little bit because they sound a little bit quiet compared to the voice sound effects whenever we pick up a new weapon. Lethal Excess is very fun if you get those power-ups, and you can see it's very smooth with lots of things going on with this constantly changing scenery, and once you get far with this game it is very rewarding, but it will take you some time to get through it, and novices can wander blindly through this as I'm basically showing you at the moment, and that got an amazing 73% score on the Lemon database. Yeah, at number 7 we find everyone's favourite Xenon II, developed by the Bitmap Brothers and released in 1989. Xenon II features a sampled soundtrack by Bomb the Bass, and that is a tremendous addition if only that played throughout, and that would be amazing, but you can play the music and the sound effects together if only they do cut out a little bit. But you can see by collecting tokens we then upgrade in the shop a bit later on, where we can find lots of amazing upgrades. Some of the games that we've seen already, it will force the player down into avenues, and some of those will be dead ends, so you will have to memorise these levels to a certain extent, and at least memorise the patterns and know when to pull back on the controller to go in reverse. Sometimes it's worth it, sometimes it isn't, and if you don't collect those upgrades earlier on, you will find pretty weak firepower and you'll be unable to get through the game. Xenon II is a fan favourite because of the background and the smooth scrolling and the colour effects and everything else, but we have seen more colours in other shooters, and we have seen more responsive controls and easier gameplay in the shooters that we've seen so far. But for some reason, fans absolutely adored this game, and they gave it a high score. I've always been absolutely rubbish at this game, and I make no bones about it. I don't particularly enjoy it, but fans love it, awarding this 74%. Number 6, it's Wings of Death, developed by Eclipse Software and published by Thalion in 1989. Wings of Death is a rather understated shooter which has bags of playability and bags of atmosphere, but not that much on the sound effects front, but it does get better a little bit later. On level 2 we find flowers, and this reminds me of a top-down Apidia, and so we find insects and things that we have to destroy, and you might notice our dragon changes shape completely depending on the power-up that that thing has. You can see with this small firepower our dragon is very small on screen. That means we are not as large a target. Again, this game gives us a breather at certain opportunities before all hell breaks loose, and those bits of breathers are definitely helpful, especially when you have a weedy weapon, like this one that I've got at the moment. But hopefully we will be able to upgrade, or at least avoid instant death in this case.
Circle blast.
Even though the sound effects are plain and the music is quite enjoyable, you can see the skulls on the skeletons underneath that picture, and you can see that we can use our weapon to fire backwards, and that's ideal because lots of shots are appearing from behind, and that's not ideal in a shooter like this. But we can take our time and we can weave between those, and that's a great feeling of control, and it's not so random sometimes as long as we have that firepower. Later levels we find a lava level, and this reminds us of Swiv, if you've managed to get this far in Swiv, and it's great that it gives us so much variety and so much action, and there is a lot of environment packed into this game, even though the graphics are nothing to write home about and the controls are only just bearable. You can see we're only just moving with this heavy weapon, and that's all part of the design of this game. Wings of Death has a 75% rating on the Lemon Database. Number 5 is Mega Typhoon, published by Nordlicht in 1996. Typhoon is a very fast-paced mega shooter on the Amiga, and it will take some kind of dexterous reflexes to get through it. Luckily we have amazing firepower, and we have some forward blasters as well as some purple multi-cannon type weapons. This is known as a bullet hell game, where we have more than just a handful of bullets on the screen at any one time, and of course the 16 sprite enemies have disappeared, and what we have instead is a multi-array of things attacking us all at once, and the limitations of our Amiga have been smashed with games like this. We'll find huge bosses and also combat in space and along a variety of different levels, all with tremendously loud sound effects. Typhoon has at least 4 different scenarios, and when you loop the game you'll get to play it again, only it's slightly harder, or at least I think so, and I know a number of players have managed to loop this game a number of times, which is absolutely incredible. Also notice very clever use of the 16 colour paths on most of these levels, and the frame rates are maintained, so if you want a very fast-paced, fast action shoot 'em up on your Amiga and you haven't played Mega Typhoon, then where have you been? Glorious Mega Typhoon has a 77% or 7.7 out of 10. Number 4, we have Hybris, published by Discovery Software and published once again in 1989. Hybris is like a conversion of an arcade shooter that we never got on the Amiga. It's an Amiga exclusive as far as I know, and the gameplay on offer will keep even novices entertained because all you have to do is to memorize these waves, just like a Galaga game, and once you've memorized where those attack patterns appear from, you can then wander over to that side of the screen and blow those away. Find some barriers that you can see glowing on the floor, and those can't be shot through unless we expand, and we can expand by rotating the joystick in a circle, and then we will upgrade to a mega weapon. We are now on grade 4, and that's the grade 4 mega weapon, which means we can maul through all the enemies with a 99% hit-proof shield. Upgrading to grade 5, we find purple lasers, and by rotating we can upgrade to these mega balls, and even though this doesn't give us a shield, if we get hit we'll only be sent down to the grade 4 firepower, where we'll be given those rotating shields again. So it's possible to keep upgrading and degrading and get through the game. Because of the rotating technique to get us out of trouble, we can often rotate and give ourselves some extra firepower just when we needed it, and this makes a huge difference, especially when you get onto the third of the 3 levels in the game. Hybris is immensely playable and it's one of my favourite shooters. It's worth an average of 83.3% on the Lemon database. Number 3, we have Swiv, developed by Random Access and released in 1991. Swiv is a very difficult and a very long shooter which auto-loads itself from just the one disc and has a massive array of landscapes and enemies. Swiv, like Silkworm, also has a unique power-up system where we have to destroy an item, namely a goose, and having destroyed that we'll get some power-up. The end-of-level bosses are immensely satisfying with an immense sound effects library. We can even use a shield token we managed to pick up as a power-up to defeat this thing, which is lobbing all kinds of things towards us, and sometimes you can shoot shields up the screen and defeat hard bosses like that just by picking up that token. And yes, we can destroy both of these in that manner. Swiv appeared on all the platforms, including the ZX Spectrum and even the Commodore 64, but for my money, the Amiga original is the best one. It's still a classic, and it's the one which contains, for my money, the best sound effects. If you want quality from a shoot 'em up, then you can't go far wrong with this one, and even when you die, it's still a great feeling to get just that little bit further. Swiv has an 83.4% rating on the Lemon Amiga database. Number 2, it's the sequel to Hybris, it's Battle Squadron, published by Electric Zoo in 1989. Battle Squadron, of course, contains some great graphics, some amazing music, and the amazing sound effects, some very fast playability, and it doesn't take it too hard on the player. In fact, they can evade most of these bullets, and it's not as hard as the games that we've seen so far. Now, if we rotate the joystick in a circular direction, we'll get a smart bomb, and in 2-player mode, it makes the 2 smart bomb effect even more powerful as we try to battle that landscape together. you can see different weapons on offer, and that means it's great. We don't have to face the same level in the same way every time. Squadron not only contains very fluid gameplay, very colourful graphics, the music and the sound effects of course, and the longevity to back that up, because again in 2-player mode you can have some amazing action and you get to fly around the planet's surface and in a series of caves as well, where we get to take on some bosses. The game is quite difficult, and even though the bullet dodging is quite slow compared to many of the bullet hell games, you can actually outrun all of these bullets. There is a tight space on screen, so even experts will find a difficult time playing this. Battle Squadron has an 85% rating on the Lemon Database. And that means at number 1, it's another game by Core Design. This is the highest rated shoot 'em up of the vertical variety listed on the Lemon Amiga Database. Yes, it's Banshee, developed by Core and released by them in 1994. Banshee, we fly a monoplane around a semi-modern landscape which takes in a huge environment, and it will take the player a long time, like all of these shooters, to fly from one end of that environment to the other, and the entire thing scrolls until you get to the end of level boss, way into the distance. As you destroy enemies, we can collect those power-ups, and it's important to collect all those, otherwise you simply will not have that firepower to get through, and you do need to collect every single bullet to destroy all these enemies. Sound effects aren't so bold that it'll blow the TV speakers apart, but they are decent enough to flash out this number 1 game, and they are localized as well, so when you find a church and cars and gangster vehicles driving down the road trying to blow us away, they will all have their own unique sound effects. This is still level 1 of the game, and it's pretty difficult as you can see, and it really does have a very gentle learning curve, and as long as you build up that firepower and destroy the most obvious targets. Banshee is a tremendous game, and there are ice levels and fire levels and things you wouldn't believe later on, and these amazing graphics are only available on the AGA Amiga. I give it top marks and you gave it top marks. It's number 1 vertical shooter on the Amiga of all time with an incredible score of 85.2%.